So, I've been seeing people not getting top 4 with Yone, and it's mainly due to the lack of knowledge. But don't worry my friends, because Exteriors Heater Chikshu, Reaper Bruiser. In this video, we're gonna cover the strongest items, strongest units, and strongest augments. With that, we're gonna go to our items, and the main unit that is gonna be our DPS is Kayn. And his best in slot is having a Bloodthirster. This item gives him sustain, some damage, and it gives him a shield if he loses a certain amount of HP. Edge and Eye is a very good defense item for him because he's a frontline unit. Having this item will allow him to stay in the battle a little bit longer because once he hits a certain amount of HP, he becomes invulnerable for a couple of seconds and he will just keep spinning over and over everywhere. And then Giant Slayer is a very good damage amplification item for him since most things are HP based right now at the moment. So having this item would shred all that HP down. The best alternative items you could pick up is having a Sterix Gauge on Kayn. This item allows him to last longer in fights and it gives him some extra damage. Speaking of other sustain items, having a Time's Resolve is okay because it gives him more damage and it gives him more armor and magic resist. If you cannot build an Edge and Knight, these two are really good options. And if you cannot build a Giant Slayer, having a Last Whisper is pretty decent because it breaks armor, so it allows you to kill tanks even quicker. And then if you cannot build any lifesteal item at all, like for example like Bloodthirster, then having a Hodge is okay for that. The best Ornn artifacts you could pick up for Kayn would be having an Infinity Force. If you don't need Giant Slayer, this is a really good item for that. For one, is one of the highest win rate items for him, and it gives him all stats that frontline would need, like HP, damage, and armor and magic resist. And then if you don't need Edge and Knight, having a Spectral Cutlass is very good because this item allows you to go to the back line and just kill everything instantly. So it turns Kayn into an assassin like he's supposed to be. And then same thing with either like a Giant Slayer or an Edge and Knight, you can trade that out with Mittens. This item is a very good frontline item overall because it makes you give extra attack speed and it also makes you invulnerable to Eternal Winter, so it doesn't make you get stunned by the item. And then the Kayn's counterpart, it'll be having a Yone. You can treat him more like a tank unit instead of like a DPS unit because Kayn will be your main DPS, but his best in slot would be having a Bloodthirster as well. This item gives him enough sustain so he can last longer in fights, and then speaking of lasting longer in fights, having a Times is very good for that because it gives him more armor and magic resist, so it makes him more into like a tankier version of Kayn. And then Kayn, if he doesn't have Last Whisper, you want to put Last Whisper on Yone so you can break armor for Kayn so you can do that extra damage and kill all the tanks. And then same thing like Kayn, Sterix Gauge is a very good alternative item for Yone. And then if Yone cannot get a Time's Resolve, having Edge and Knight is fine for Yone, but that's if you have the augment for it. If not, I would rather force a Time's Resolve for Yone because this item is actually better on him than having an Edge and Knight. Unless you're playing Yone as the main carry, then that's a different story. And the QSS is pretty decent overall for Yone because he's more of a frontline unit that's like more like a bruiser instead of more like an assassin like Kayn. And then same thing like Kayn doesn't have a Bloodthirster, then having Hodge is fine. Same with Yone. If you cannot get a Bloodthirster, having Hodge is okay. And the best Ornn artifact for Yone would be having an Infinity Force. This item is actually really good to have over a Titans because it gives him everything he would need that Titans has. And Admittance is also very good. You can substitute that with Titans as well because it gives him a lot of attack speed and it gives him technically like a free resistance to chill, which is basically eliminating Eternal Winter. And then compared to Kayn, having this item is actually a lot better on Yone, which is having a Death Defiance. You can choose this over having a Bloodthirster or a Titans. This item is very good for Yone since he's going to be taking a lot of damage, so this item would negate that damage. The best support items you can have on this comp would be having an Aegis. This item actually gives you a lot of armor and magic resist and the attack speed that Kayn and Yone would need. And since you want your board to last a lot longer, having a Radiant Virtue is very good for that, and having a +1 unit like having ZZ Rod helps a lot. And then Zephyr is very good for this board, mainly due because it gives you attack speed and it also negates 1 unit if you position correctly. For utility items you want on the board is having a Kindred with a Morellicon or either Black Cleaver. The reason why you want Morellicon on her because she's AoE and she anti-heal everything, and then same thing with the whole AoE thing. She can negate 2 people's armor and magic resist with Black Cleaver. And Silas is a very good item holder with Onyx Spark. Speaking of Silas being a good item holder for spats, he's also a really good item holder for Reaper. You can play up to 5 Reaper with this, it's fine. And then the best tank unit you can have on the board is having a Galio, and the only item he would need is just Protector's Vow, or even a Gargoyle Stoneplate is okay. And the best units to play at like level 4 is having a Darius carry to begin with. You want to put like the Yone or Kayn items on him, which is like the best start would be Bloodthirster, and the rest of the units you want to play for early game would be having like a Malphite and Yorick for that Behemoth, and Yorick's also an Umbro with Darius, so you get that Umbro start. Since Darius is also a duelist, having a Kiana in helps a lot, and then Kiana also gives you that synergy with Malphite to get that extra heavenly stats on the board. If you cannot get a Kiana early, having a Yasuo is fine too. If you cannot decide what item to slam, doing one of the BIS slams, for example like Bloodthirster or Edge and Knight, you can never go wrong with these items. This is actually very good, even on Darius. And then if you want to win streak, having a Morellicon that's very good on Darius Darius as well. You could throw it on Kindred later. And then Crown Guard and Adaptive Helm is also very good on Darius. And you can just throw it on Silas later. And then same thing with Steric's Gauge. It's okay on Darius, I would say. But it's actually really good for Yone and Kayn later on in the game. But for these 4 items though, it's only cases if you want to win streak. And then when you hit level 5, you could throw in like a Kindred or a Kha'Zix or something, because you're going to need them eventually later on down the line. And then when you hit level 6, you could throw in either the Kha'Zix or Kindred that I mentioned on the board as well. And then if you have so many Kindreds, you can also play for a Kindred reroll, since she's also a Reaper, and she's actually pretty powerful too at the moment if you want to play for a reroll Reaper. And her best in slot would be having like a blue buff, Merlocon. These two are like a must-have with a death cap to amplify the damage. But though if you don't need a death cap, you can do a different alternative items such as Nashor's Tooth, Giant Slayer, or Archangel Staff, or even like other damage items like Ornn artifacts such as DFG, Lichbane. And then if you get a mana Zane for that reason, you can throw it with the blue buff, or you can substitute it for the blue buff. And this is how the board will look like if you're playing for Kindred reroll, where you have 4 Bruiser and then 2 Reaper, and you have to have the Rek'Sai with the Kindred, so you can have that Dryad activated. So you can 3-star like the Kindred and Aatrox. If you want to, you can also try to 3-star the Rek'Sai and Kha'Zix. It's not mandatory to do, but it would be mandatory to obviously to 3-star Kindred since you're playing her as the carry. And then you can also get Aatrox pretty easily with it on top of that. But though if you get 4 Reaper instead, like if you get the Kayn at level 6, then you can play 2 Bruiser and then 4 Reaper. This would be a lot stronger to play instead of having that 4 Bruiser. And if you get Onyx Spark, that's a plus because you would want to throw it on either like a Rek'Sai or Aatrox, so she get that magic resist shred for Kindred to do extra damage. And then going back on track, if you hit level 7, you could just throw in a Yone, or you can throw in another Behemoth just to get that extra tankiness going. If you're playing for a Yone carry direction, then you just put the BIS items on Yone instead with Bloodthirster, Tines, and Last Whisper, or the different alternative items you can build. But the full board will be like having 4 Reaper and then 3 Bruiser until you hit level 8 with an extra Bruiser, so you can have 4 Bruiser on the board, and then extra items on either Kindred or Kayn, depending if AP or AD, doesn't really matter. But I would rather play for the Kayn carry direction, where you have the BIS with Edge of Night, Bloodthirster, and then Giant Slayer, and you just put the Last Whisper plus Lifesteal item on Yone. I feel like this is the better board overall, just because there's a lot of 4-cost units you have to hit, like Kayn, Silas, and Galio. But if you play for either the Yone direction or the Kindred direction, either way, it's still like top 4 with that side. So just play whatever you want to play, or just play whatever you hit. And then when you hit level 9, you just throw in a Wukong, and I would prefer this kind of positioning, because if you put Wukong on like sides, he would just die right away. So if you have Wukong like somewhere in the middle, but in like second row, he would be able to come out and cast his ability at least for the 3rd time maybe, because the 3rd time he casts, the better he is. Also, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but the reason why the units are positioned like this because of the Umbral trait. So if the Umbral trait is on the other side, then you want to do the opposite. And then for the best augments you could choose from, it's Grim Harvest. It buffs your Reapers really well. And speaking of Reaper, having a Reaper crest for Silas later down the line is very good on him too, because the more Reapers you have, the more damage you do over time. And then Little Buddies is only good for specifically for Kayn, because it gives him more attack speed and it gives him some more HP. Same with Silas and Galio, it gives him more HP, so it buffs him up a little bit. So if you're playing for the 4-cost carry, you'll take Little Buddies for that. Harmless is always good for frontline units because they need lifesteal, and then Tiny But Deadly is very powerful for them because it gives them movement speed and attack speed. Any of the item augments such as Portable Forge because it gives you a free or an artifact item, Gargantuan Resolve busts the item of Tines Resolve and it gives you a free Tines Resolve. Freaky Friday gives you 2 Infinity Force so you can put on Yone and Kayn. Now today is very good because it busts the Edge of Night item and you get a free Edge of Night item. You Have My Sword is good overall because you need a lot of swords and it buffs your board with more attack damage. And then Idealism is good just because it buffs the unit that holds a Hodge item. And that is it for my Reaper Bruiser comp guide. If you have any questions or if you want me to cover a different comp, just let me know in the comment section down below. Until then, I'll see you guys next time. Later.